Hi, my dear Astro family. Last week, we did a video about Venus and Jupiter, the two benefic planets, and how it might play out in someone's natal chart as well as by transit. And today, Corinne prepared a presentation for us on Saturn and Mars. Now, because there is going to be a meeting point between them two on the 10th of April, so she's going to walk you through what it means from a Vedic point of view. But if you are curious about what it might mean from a tropical point of view, then I recommend listening to the video I just posted yesterday, and then you will be able to look at from a tropical point of view as well. And if you want to know how it might play out for the 12 signs, then you might want to consider joining my YouTube membership, where you get additional 10 videos a month. Thank you for joining me today again, Corinne. We are looking forward to hearing your aspect on Saturn and Mars, which is very malefic, if I'm not mistaken, in Vedic astrology, and then it might be a disastrous type of energy, right?
Yeah, and also
Now, by the way, say again, sorry?
Sorry, continue. Sorry, go on.
No, I just wanted to mention that if anyone is interested in our retreat, which is going to be taking place in France in June, then you might want to visit my website and then book your spot. It's only limited spaces. So there is going to be maximum 10 people who can attend. The deadline is 15th of April. So if you are interested, you need to book it. Pretty much drop me an email. We're only going to be organizing the retreat if there are the minimum number of people, which is 10, as I said. That's the maximum, actually. And then we can go ahead. There is going to be yoga. There is going to be a little bit of fun, astrology lectures about relationship and trauma, and how to empower yourself with your traumatic events and how to turn them around. So it should be a very transformational energy. And I guess with Saturn-Mars conjunction on top of us, this is a great opportunity for everyone to dig deep and work through some of the traumatic experiences what we had. But I'd like to mention actually that I think Saturn and Mars is really about courage and resilience. And it is considered, very challenging. I mean, it is a difficult position. One of the reasons why, because Saturn is the detrimental ruler of Aries. But while Mars is exalted in the sign of Capricorn, I feel like what should be happening here, if Mars is listening to Saturn, then actually it should be an okay for many of us. So it's not all gloomy, but it's surely a big challenge. I mean, two malefics are coming together. And to be honest, whenever Saturn and Mars get together, there is some disaster going down in the world. So I'm not going to take away that, but on a personal level, you can use this in the bestest possible way, surely. But I'm going to hand it over to Corinne, and let's see what she has got to say about Saturn and Mars.
Okay, so we are talking about Mars and Saturn, the conjunction also in the natal charts. And in Vedic astrology, we also use tropical zodiac and whole sign house system. So if you're using any in like not equal house system, you should change to whole sign house system if you're looking at this video. And before we go into the conjunction, I just like to point out the nature of Mars and Saturn separately and what they mean when they are combined together. So Mars signifies masculinity, and masculinity is about being inceptive, independent. And Mars has a lot of passion, hunger, and drive for conquering desires. That's why it gets things moving. And Mars also signifies individuality, self-resilience, strength, not just the muscle strength, and also the things that can improve our strength, such as like tools, weapons, technology, and machines. So in Vedic astrology, Mars also rules those things like technology, machine, and tools. And Mars is a very independent planet. And when Mars always wants to be free. So in the process of becoming independent in becoming free, you can have friction, conflicts with other people. That's why Mars is a malefic planet, because it's associated with aggression. And sometimes it can escalate to wars and violence. And usually in the natal chart, it can bring some challenges in our lives. But when Mars is in good dignity, it signifies courage and also our willingness to take risks to fulfill our desires and fight for the right cause, not just fight for the sake of fighting. And Mars likes to command, and Mars likes to lead and give orders. And Saturn is the planet of negativity. It minimizes everything. So that's the opposite nature of Jupiter, because Jupiter is a planet of positivity. It's plussing, like everything pluses, increasing and growing. But for Saturn, everything decreases, reduces. That's why Saturn is a malefic, because it takes away and limitation. It brings a limitation to your life. But Saturn also associated with the weaknesses in our lives. And Saturn is a planet of pessimism. So Saturn doesn't trust people or trust other planets easily. And that's why this planet is very skeptical, critical, analytical. And that's why Saturn is really good at logical thinking and scientific thinking. So Saturn actually, for Capricorn and Aquarius, they're actually very scientific and logical thinking, because Saturn is not emotional about things. Saturn sees things as they are. And that's why Saturn is really realistic, detached, and objective. And in the previous video, I mentioned about the concept of planetary friendship in Vedic astrology, but I forgot to mention that planetary friendship actually leads to the concept of Lajitadi Avashtas. So this is the method that we use to determine the dignity of the planets and how they have an impact on your chart, how they have an impact on other planets. So for Mars, Mars has three enemies. Sorry, Mars has three friends, Sun, Moon, and Jupiter, and only one enemy, which is Mercury. So Saturn is not an enemy to Mars. And that's why Mars is probably exalted in Saturn's sign, because Mars is not an enemy. So sorry, Saturn is not an enemy to Mars. But from Saturn's point of view, Saturn has three enemies, Sun, Moon, and Mars. And Saturn is the planet that has more enemies in these planetary friendships. Like Moon doesn't have any enemies, and Jupiter is not an enemy to any planet. So you can see that this dynamic here. And from Saturn's point of view, Mars is an enemy to Saturn. So, and also there are other rules for these Lajitadi Avashtas. For example, anything conjunct with Saturn is starving the planets. So that means the qualities of the planets is starved. And any planets conjunct Jupiter delights the planets. So all the qualities of the planets will be amplified, because Jupiter is a benefic and it's a planet of positivity. And any planets conjunct the sun, the planets will be agitated. And of course, when it's too close, then it becomes combustion. But usually agitation is more severe than starvation. So for example, if Venus conjuncts Saturn, Saturn is starving Venus. So Venus is in the starvation state. When Venus conjuncts the sun, Venus is agitated. Venus is in agitation state. And agitation is more severe than starvation. So those are some concepts about Lajitali Avashtas. And in this conjunction, even though Mars and Saturn conjunction, even though Saturn is not an enemy to Mars, but because in this conjunction, Saturn starves whatever it's with. So Saturn actually is starving Mars, and Mars is an enemy to Saturn. So Mars is also starving Saturn. So in this conjunction, they are starving each other. So that's why it's one of the most difficult combinations in Vedic astrology. It forms Yama Yoga. Yoga means union. And in Vedic astrology, they have hundreds of yogas. And for Yama Yoga, this is the yoga for struggles. And if we look at from Mars's point of view, because Mars is starved by Saturn, So usually people have this combination, they have some anger issues, suppressed anger, not necessarily lashing out on other people, but they have anger that's more directly towards themselves, like they are angry with themselves. Because usually they will have some kind of authority figures in their lives that's dominating them and not allowing them to express their true selves, express their desires and wants and wishes. They are not allowed to be themselves. They are not allowed to do the things that they want. So as a result, when they grow up, their will is being frustrated. So whenever they want to do something, whenever they want to initiate something, there's a lack of confidence. And also there's a voice at the back of their head telling them, you're not supposed to do this. So that's why their will being frustrated and they're angry with themselves. And Mars also represents our ability to act and make decisions in emergency situations. So when Mars is staffed by Saturn, Saturn limits your ability to respond quickly in emergency situations. Your instinctive responses become slower, which can be quite dangerous. For example, driving, you need quick responses. And or if when you see somebody is drowning, and what are you going to do? How are you going to act? But in general, when Mars is staffed by Saturn, when there's a problem arises, you feel incapable. You feel there's a lack of confidence in solving problems, and also you feel frustrated with yourself because you're unable to do it. So frustration is the key word if we look at this conjunction from Mars's point of view. And if we look at from Saturn's point of view, Saturn is associated with weaknesses, our weaknesses. When Saturn is strong, we acknowledge our weaknesses and we are not bothered by it. We work on it. But when Saturn is staffed by Mars, you can be overwhelmed with your own weaknesses. For example, you might constantly questioning yourself if you're doing something wrong, if you're in the right place in the right time, and you identify yourself with problems and mistakes. And also Saturn is associated with patience and endurance. When Saturn is staffed by Mars, because Mars is like now energy. So you become impatient because Saturn is supposed to be very patient, but now you become impatient. And when you see problems, you want to fix it immediately. But at the same time, you also question yourself if you are able to fix them because you identify with problems. So as a result, you feel frustrated with your inability to solve problems as quickly as you want because you become impatient with your own problems or other problems. And you become angry with yourself because you feel like you are unable to do it. So you can see that there's a negative loop in your psychological complex. That's why this conjunction is difficult because you're constantly battling with yourself. And it can be very exhausting and frustrating and draining. And it's very important because we are talking about this very difficult combination here. So if you happen to have this combination, it's also important to consider the qualities of the planets. For example, if Mars-Saturn conjunction happens in the good sign, like Capricorn, they're both dignified. So the harsh definitions that I just mentioned can be manifested in a more likable way. And also we need to consider if there are other helpful aspects to this combination. For example, if Jupiter is aspecting, looking at this combination, so Jupiter can help. Jupiter is always a relieving factor. And the third, if this combination Mars and Saturn forms any auspicious yoga, for example, Raj yoga. If Mars, for example, Mars ruling your 4th house, Saturn ruling your 9th house, then these two planets, even though they're malefic in one house, but they are forming Raj yoga. So it will make a huge difference in your charts as well. And lastly, if the combination is not prominent in your charts, then you don't have to worry about it too much. For example, if your Jupiter is super strong, like exalted in Cancer in the 9th house, the focus of the chart, the focus of your destiny will be directly towards Jupiter in the 9th house in Cancer. Even though you have Mars and Saturn conjunction somewhere in your charts, but they are not the focus. The focus will be the Jupiter in Cancer in the 9th house. All the charts will go directly towards the 9th house and Jupiter there. And Mars conjunction will play a portion of your life, but not dominating your whole destiny. So that's the basic idea about Mars and Saturn combination. What about
It's really interesting because Saturn and Mars, I usually describe this aspect as the Botox. And obviously, what is Botox? We're freezing the muscle. So I completely agree on that side that it's a constant battle within us, because most likely we do the Botox because we cannot accept the aging process, right? And then we don't want to be. Obviously, Saturn is an older archetype, Mars is a younger archetype. So again, another clash there, whether accepting the aging process or not. Obviously, Mars rules also the sign of Scorpio, which is connected to well. I did my own research on death, and I made a webinar recently about death, and the statistics are amazing. Actually, Jupiter and Saturn were connected to death more than Pluto. And everyone believes that Pluto is the planet of death. Now, I went through 300 charts where Pluto only popped up about 20%. Jupiter and Saturn popped up at least 40-45% each time. And of course, when we start thinking about, you know, Jupiter, which is naturally the ruler of Pisces, and that's about surrender to a cosmic power, it does make sense, but we would never believe that Jupiter is going to kill us. I mean, it's relieving us from, you know, from suffer, most likely.
Yeah.
But anyway, we are not here to talk about death, but yes, this Saturn Mars might be bringing up the topic of fear of death as well, and the fear of falling into nothingness, especially in the sign of Pisces, by the way. And the other thing I wanted to mention actually here is that in Hellenistic astrology, Mars has got planetary joy in the 6th house. And Corinne mentioned that in Vedic astrology, Mars rules tools and fixing things and all those type of things. Same in Hellenistic astrology, actually, because it has got planetary joy. So it has got things to do with machines, fixing things, maintaining things. So therefore, all the tools, what we need for those. So yeah, the machineries belong to Mars as well, in my opinion. And for example, it could indicate a lack of machines to do something, right? So a lack of machine, for example, I don't know, to cross the river or something like that. Just thinking about the Pisces archetype. Or obviously Pisces rules the oil rings. So maybe a lack of drilling machine, or the drilling machines are and so on. But anyway, I spoke about this from in the previous video, so I'm not going to take away the time, but I just wanted to confirm that I do see the coloration there. And most importantly, as Corinne said, I think the constant struggle, what we have got within ourselves, is going to be a big topic here, because Saturn and Mars conjunction is, yes, about the lack of courage, the lack of strength. And the upcoming transit is actually happening in the sign of Pisces. Most likely it doesn't have. It's just swimming around like a fish does. And the question is, where are we going to end up? Right? So that's why I said in the introduction of the video, if Mars is able to listen a little bit to Saturn, such as slowing down, planning things out, not trying to run the marathon, because I tend to call Saturn and Mars conjunction as the long distance runner. And without training, we're never going to get to the end of the tunnel. We need to be able to, you know, look at how much strength we've got. We need to train for it, and we do need a lot of patience.
Yeah.
Of course, Mars doesn't want either Saturn to keep saying no to us, because Saturn is the planet of no. So we need to blend the two energies and have a strategy, but finding the middle ground so that we are not running the marathon without the proper tools and equipment, what we need for it. It's kind of like in the sign of Pisces, we need to be hydrated, right? Because if it's sunny outside, we're going to collapse, right? And then you're not going to be able to run anymore. So make sure that you have got all the tools and stuff you need to be able to run that journey, whatever is ahead of you. So now we're going to break it down for the 12 signs as well from a Vedic point of view.
Yes.
So handing it back to you.
Thank you. So before we go on to 12 signs, the definition of conjunction in Vedic astrology is that when planets that are in the same sign, and we're using whole sign house system, one sign equals one house. If the two or more planets that are in the same sign, same house, no matter how far apart they are by degree, they are considered as conjunction. So for example, if your Mars is at 2 degrees Capricorn and Saturn is at 28 degrees of Capricorn, they are considered as conjunction. And if your Saturn is at 28 degrees Capricorn, Mars is at 1st degree Aquarius, they are not considered as conjunction, even though they only have 2 degrees apart, because they have 2 different lords. So for the first house rules you, your life path, your appearance, your look, your body. The most important one is your body, your ego and personality. And first house is the beginning of life, beginning of things. That's the sunrise. And Mars is the planet of getting things moving, initiating. So when people have Mars in the first house, you can be a go-getter. You're very ambitious and not afraid of going out there and fulfilling your goals and desires. And when you have Mars in the first house, you are super independent and self-determined. And Mars also symbolizes strength. And first house is the body. So you have a very good physical vitality and strength. And you're never fat, medium size. And the body type is very good for fighting, kung fu, martial arts, or yoga. And people with Mars in the first house have a lot of passion and enthusiasm for conquering wealth. So you can be greedy for that. But if Mars is in good dignity, then it can flip, like the manifestation won't be so negative. It will be more likable. And you're not afraid of taking risks. You're very adventurous. And Saturn in the first house indicates initial challenges and difficulties in childhood, because the first house is the beginning of life. So you can encounter more limitations, difficulties in the beginning of your life in the childhood. And health, because the first house is the body. Health may not have been great during early days. And they may have been a sense of scarcity in your childhood as well. Like you feel like there's a lack. But if Saturn is not too bad, you learn to overcome your problems as you grow older. And if Saturn is exalted in the first house or in its own sign, it brings a lot of good things in the first house. You become very disciplined person, and in a positive way, and you have good grit. And for this conjunction, Saturn and Mars conjunction in the first house, the thing that you really need to worry about is your health, because 2 malefic planets can cause trouble for your health, or it can create some physical problems, or it can create some frustration with your health or with your appearance. You might be frustrated with your image as well. But if this conjunction happens in a good sign, it gives you a lot of strength and great resilience and strong willpower. Should I go on?
I tend to look at Mars from a survival need point of view. So obviously that would be the natural ruler of the first house. And the first house represents the first 18 months of our life. So if we start thinking about what happens in the first 18 months of our life, a baby is crying, it's only making connection to mommy, and sleep, cry, and again, sleep, cry, right? And eat. And as soon as mommy disappears, we have no clue where mommy went. So that's abandonment issue. And Saturn can, unfortunately, as you said, cause some type of childhood trauma in the first 18 months of our life, where we felt like we had to be fighting for our survival, or our survival needs were not met. Maybe because mommy had to work hard, Saturn. I mean, Saturn doesn't represent mommy in our chart, but it's one of the parental figure. Or it could talk to us about the lack of, support, what we are receiving, or the lack of support, what you give yourself, actually. So Corinne mentioned health issues, and I completely agree with that. It's crucial that these people do sport all the time. It's really crucial that you find ways of getting rid of your anger. It's about containing your anger, but at the same time, it is about letting your anger out as well, because when you do not allow yourself to be angry and you keep it inside, you're going to blow up from inside out. So it's good to have a backyard. It's good to be smashing glasses. It's good to go and then punch a bag rather than punching someone's face. But Mars is entitled to punch. And Saturn is just telling you probably, no, don't punch other people's face, please. Punch a bag instead, but do that constantly. And then I think it could be a good way to deal with all the frustration what we've got.
And also,
Yeah.
yeah, and also I agree with the sports, because some of the great athletes, they have Saturn and Mars conjunction, because they just push themselves.
Yeah, that's why I said it's the long distance runner, I mean, doing a 3-4 hour training a day is crazy. Now, this Saturn Mars conjunction, which is going to be taking place on 14 degrees of Pisces, that is bang on my Mars as well. And I'm back to a fitness camp doing 4 training sessions a day the year when I'm going to buff up and I'm going to have the muscle I want to, because I'm going to be patient enough to actually get there. Yeah, so I don't mind this Saturn-Mars conjunction, but it's very important that Saturn-Mars, which is the muscle tension as well, for example, in the first house, to be sure that we don't strain ourselves too much, because surely there's going to be accident there. So I have to remind myself that Saturn-Mars conjunction is going to be on my... I'm not going to 3-4 sessions constantly, especially not around 8 till the 13th of April, because I can get injured. Yeah, sorry, second house.
No worries. So second house is the house...
Are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So second house is the house below the first house. So it supports the body, and that's why it rules family, wealth, resources, and food to support the first house. And second house also rules our voice and speech. And Mars is strict, hard, forceful, individualistic planets. And second house is the nature of second house is actually very soft, because it's a house of family. It's your group, the group of people that supports you, nurture you. And Mars being a tough planet is not mashing well in the second house. Mars in the second house can cause clashes and conflicts with your family. And because Mars is about people you fight against, and second house is the people who support and nurture you. So you fight against with your family members, family lineage, or you just don't agree with the traditions of the family. You don't go along with the flow of the family. And usually if Mars in the second house, it indicates that you are not well supported by the family as well. Saturn is a planet of scarcity and lack. So when it's in the second house, there's a sense of lack, resources and wealth, or fear of not having enough. Or maybe Saturn in the second house is because your upbringing, the family tradition is about it's more fear-based, like you have to work, you have to make money, otherwise you don't have this and that. So such people, they always have a like fear of not having enough in the back of their head. And similarly to Mars in the second house, Saturn makes you unhappy with your family. Mars in the second house, you fight with your family. You fight with maybe you don't agree with the tradition of the family. Saturn here, you're not happy with your family traditions and maybe the cultural norms, because usually family is influenced by the society, by the country. And so that's why it could be that you're not really fond of the cultural norms with your country as well. So this can push you to relocate somewhere else than your birthplace, or maybe you adopt a different culture which can make you happier. And for this conjunction, Saturn-Mars conjunction, 2 malefics in the second house. So you probably don't have a very loving family. They could be quite strict, disciplined, and perhaps they didn't demonstrate what loving and nurturing is. And 2 malefic planets in the second house can also cause some trouble situations in your money. For example, you might not be able to make wise decisions regarding money, or you're always in a state of financial shortage. For example, like Mars in the second house, you make money fast, but you spend money fast as well. So you're always in a state of that, like you don't have enough. And, or maybe you make a lot of money, but you have this poor mentality, so you feel like you don't have enough. And both Saturn and Mars indicates challenging family dynamics, clashes, not well supported, not happy with the family traditions. So you could be happier if you relocate somewhere than your birthplace, if you have Saturn Mars in the second house.
Yeah. I just want to talk a little bit psychologically about the second house, because I think, you know, I made a webinar series on the houses, and I really focused on how the houses are built on each other. And I think often people forget about that the houses are connected. Now, the first house was about the ignition key of the car, the physical body, the initial spark. Now, the second house is here. We need to learn about how our body functions. For example, we need to be exploring our sensual side. So the second house represents 18 months to 4 years old period in our chart. And then just think about what a baby does around that time. We explore our sexuality. We're going to have separation anxiety because we're going to go to nursery school, and, you know, mommy is going to cook in the kitchen. So this is a place where we need to establish ourselves as an identity. And it is a realization that mommy was just an extension of us. And for example, if we have got moon in the first house, that could be a problem, because it's very difficult for the person to remember that I am a separate entity from mommy. And this is a learning curve with Saturn and Mars, in my opinion, how to separate myself from the crowd in a way. I mean, this is the house when you realize, oh, I've got a toe, I've got a hand, and actually I can use them. Wow, how good. I can eat on my own. I don't need mommy to feed me, you know. So we start putting things into our mouth. So it's the exploration of tastes, but also this is the realization I've got certain talents. I can reach something. So this is the house of talent. And Saturn and Mars maybe can cause issues around figuring out what your talents are. This is the house of storage. So we put so much crap into our body. We put so much crap into our house as well. And I think the best way to work with Saturn and Mars here is to completely clear things out, making space for something else. Because the Corinne also mentioned that this could give us a poverty mindset. And I completely agree with that. Because it's about, Saturn is a planet of reward. So we need to reward sometimes ourselves for the hard work, what we do. But at the same time, we need to sometimes say no to greed as well, because the second house is actually greedy. It wants more and more because it rules the five senses, and we want to be stimulating our five senses constantly. I think one of the best way to work with is to roll up the sleeves, to make something tangible, to get out of our comfort zone, and then get going in a way. And sometimes it just need to be meeting the essentials and a little bit extra. We don't need to become too greedy with this. How does that play out in the third house?
So the third house rules our mind, our approach to information, communication of any kind. It rules skills, siblings, your peers, teammates, and short distance travels. And third house in Vedic astrology rules our ambitions, desires, because third house is the house of desires, what you want for yourself. And third house also rules courage, because we need our courage and willpower to manifest our ambitions and desires. And also we need our willpower to compete with other people, with your peers, because they also have probably the same desires as you and same ambitions. So that's why third house is a tough house in Vedic astrology. It's a self-focused house. It's a selfish house where you need to fight and compete in order to manifest your desires. And in Vedic astrology, Mars is a significator of third house, because in Vedic astrology, each house has a different significator corresponding to different planets. And third house is for Mars. So when Mars is in the third house, it's actually doing good because you get all the good qualities of Mars. And by nature, Mars and third house, they signify similar things like self-resilience, strength, courage, dealing with competitions and peers. So Mars is actually doing very good in the third house. And Mars is very skilled because it signifies tools, technology, and machines to improve our strength. And third house is a house of skills as well. So when Mars sits in the third house, you can be very qualified and skilled to achieve goals with this placement. And similar to Mars in the first house, people with Mars in the third house are very passionate about gaining wealth, conquering wealth and goals. But because Mars is functioning really well in the third house, so you don't come across like greedy. It actually manifests in a likable way. People might see you like you're just fulfilling your desires, ambitions, and things like that, but they don't see you as greedy when Mars in the first house. And Saturn is also doing very good in the third house, because if you put tough planets in tough houses, they're actually doing good. And in Vedic astrology, 3rd, 6, 10, and 11, they are tough houses. 3rd and 6, they are the most like difficult houses. The 10 and 11 houses, they require efforts and work, not as tough as 3rd and 6. So if you put tough planets in the tough houses, they function quite well. And Saturn is not a trusting planet, so it really works very well in the third house, because in the third house, you need to compete with your peers, your siblings, your teammates to fulfill your dreams and goals and desires. And when you're doing that, you need to focus on yourself, not distracted by other people. Because Saturn is not trusting, so you won't be like distracted by other people's saying or desires and stuff. You will just focus on your goals, and it makes you super focused. For Mars and Saturn conjunction in the third house is good, even though they are malefic planets, but because like I said, they're both functioning quite well in the tough house, in tough situations. So with this conjunction in the third house, you can be very disciplined and focused, and you are blessed with a lot of strength, not just muscle strength, it's also your willpower. And third house rules the mind. Mars and Saturn here can give you intelligence to sort out situations, sort out things, and fulfill your desires and tackle challenges.
In medical astrology, Saturn and Mars rule the ears. Obviously, Mars is the representation of the head. And then if you just think about the ears, this is mainly bones. So one of them is more the left ear, and the other one is more the right one. Because I've got two left foot, I cannot remember which one right or left, but one of them is more the left and the other one is more the right ear. And it's interesting that it's in the third house, which is about communication, listening abilities. So I think this combo can mean here, what do you want to hear? What do you have got to share or to say to others? And I think this is something important. But from a psychological point of view, again, if we just carry on thinking about the baby process, this is where we discover that others also exist. This would be the age of 4 to 9. And we learn to explore what else is out there apart from me, mom, and dad. We start learning a different language to communicate our needs. We start making small talks with others. We might not be able to formulate a full sentence just yet because this is the age 4 to 9, but obviously it's about improvement. So the way you talk, the way you communicate, the way you listen to is going to be important. And often I tend to call it as the lack of the sibling problems or the sibling rivalry that could be coming into here, because it's kind of like the fear in the old baby, a new baby came along. And obviously Mars is the planet of battlefield in our chart. So often it might be showing that I wish I had a sibling, or I wish I never had a sibling because they got more attention than me. And Mars is not going to be happy with that.
So you were saying about...
Yeah, so I was mentioning the business, because what could be very important here is that the third house is actually in sextile to the first. So how we sell ourselves to others could become quite a topic here. And obviously Mars, who is very pushy, and it's great for sales probably because I'm pushing my client to buy something. Saturn says maybe slow down with that pushiness and let's just give them, a time frame, for example, that you've got 2 days to make a decision. And then somehow we meet halfway. So how much we say and how much we listen probably is a major topic in this house. Okay, what happens with the fourth house?
So fourth house represents home because that's the private space, family members, and in Vedic astrology, fourth house represents the mother. And it also rules property, lands, vehicles, all the conveniences. And it rules our emotions, private world, and inner happiness. And similar to second house, the nature of fourth house is very soft, feminine, gentle, and nurturing. It's about family and support. And Mars is the opposite of all that. And Mars is very individualistic and independent. So you can have clashes with your mother, with your family members, or within your home environments, your domestic environments. And fourth house is also a quiet and private place. And Mars is very energetic and it's about doing things. So you might find it uncomfortable or difficult when there's nothing to do. It's hard for you to relax and just chill. And Saturn is not working well in the house of family and the mother either. Because Saturn here indicates lack of nourishment from the mother, or the mother wasn't available in the early home environment. But if Saturn is in good sign, in good dignity, it probably just means the mother was working a lot. But it doesn't mean that you lack of nourishment from the mother. And fourth house rules conveniences like home, cars, property, luxuries. So Saturn here can indicate lack of those things, lack of luxuries and comfort. And Mars-Saturn combination in the fourth house indicates lack of source of comfort from the family, or the early home environments can be more restrictive, disciplined, and somehow the maternal nurturing was not available. And this combination can also indicate problems with your mother or within the family. And also you need to pay attention to mother's health, because fourth house rules the mother. And when two malefic planets in the house of your mother, you need to pay attention to the mother's health. And also on the more emotional level, you may not understand what mothering is, because the family didn't demonstrate what loving is, what nurturing is, and you probably don't understand how to love and nurture other people.
You know, this is the first water house. And water is all about memories. So I think one of the meaning of this is about overcoming all those destructive memories or trauma that we might have experienced through family. And that's going to be a topic here. We need to understand that water always looks calm, right? But it's actually one of the most dangerous elements as well, because it erodes rocks. It can cause flooding, tsunamis. Water cannot be contained. So this is the house where we have got emotional floods going on, like emotional turmoils. And Saturn and Mars clearly indicates that you have got kind of like a trigger point coming from the family, which is going to be painful, most likely. And if you cannot face that fear, both planets, by the way, in my opinion, represent depression. This is something I have spoken about in the depression class. But when we look at the symptoms of depression, 10 symptoms, probably 7 is connected to Mars. So, for example, the lack of motivation, that's a very Marsian trait. So Saturn and Mars together is surely depression. Yeah, whether it's a parent who is depressed or the parenthood makes us depressed, or we are depressed because of the way we were raised, because as I said, this is the house of memory, which we're going to be probably experiencing some really difficult one. But the other thing I'd like to mention with the fourth house is how we live in ourselves. How do we feel in our own skin? And often I experience that these people, unfortunately, do not like themselves, or they were not liked by others. This is the early childhood message we receive, that you're only going to be likable, I don't know, if you've got blue hair and yellow skin. And it gets stuck within the self. And then, so often I see self-image issues with these people as well. This is usually the place of IC, and the IC is the messages we receive subconsciously from our parents. So when Saturn and Mars are here, probably we receive the message that you have to work extremely hard, you have to work for every single penny, and you have to push to be successful, because let's say I am a woman, and women in this world, you know, they can only succeed when they are cruel, for example. So what is going to be our conception about life? That we have to be cruel, otherwise we're not going to get anywhere. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add. How about the fifth house?
So the fifth house rules creative expressions, intelligence, and children, because that's the ultimate creation. And it also rules our creative, artistic talents, entertainment, romance. And it rules past life good karmas in Vedic astrology. So Mars is very energetic and exciting energy. So people with Mars in the fifth house can have problem with concentration. So a bit like ADHD, low attention span, because they are always like trying to do something and then restless. But at the same time, you can also be a quick learner. Mars gives you this really quick intelligence, that you are able to learn things quickly, and you are very quick in your thinking, and you are intelligent with displacement. And Mars is very individualistic. So me comes first, and fifth house rules children. So Mars is not doing well when it comes to like group things. For example, second house rules the family lineage. Fourth house is also your family, and fifth house is your children, and seventh house is your partner. So when it comes to the group thing, Mars is not doing so well because Mars is about me comes first. So when you have Mars sits in the fifth house, the topics regarding children are not so positive. It could be that you don't want kids because you don't want to be limited by your kids, and you don't want to raise your kids because too much responsibilities, or kids are causing trouble for you, or you have unhappy kids. And the same dynamic for romantic connections, because Mars wants to be free. So people with this placement might be very selective in their romantic connections because they don't want to feel limited. They want to be free to do whatever they want. And Saturn here, fifth house, I mentioned that this is the past life good karmas in Vedic astrology. So Saturn in the fifth house makes you feel like you constantly have some self-doubts and insecurity about yourself, about your destiny. Like you feel like you're not very lucky, and the state of feeling lucky is not very consistent. You might wonder when your luck will go away. And fifth house also rules education in Vedic astrology. So education can have breaks when you have Saturn in the fifth house. You might drop a course or leave education and come back later in life. Or education feels really heavy and dry, boring to you, and you don't find any joy in education. So that's why you didn't continue. But if Saturn is in good dignity, Saturn is strong, you can have some type of secret knowledge about something that people don't know of. And Saturn in the fifth house also indicates that you are happy by yourself, because Saturn is a separating factor when it's in the house of connection, romantic connections with other people. You actually feel happy by yourself, and there could be less dating and socializing. And in the classical Vedic text, it says that you don't have children with Saturn in the fifth house because you feel heavy and a lot of responsibilities when you have kids, or maybe kids can be delayed with this combination. And Mars-Saturn conjunction in the fifth house can cause frustration in creative expressions, particularly the free-flowing type of creativity. But you can be good at structure and pattern-based creativity. For example, like architecture, web design, or any type of creativity where you can use your logic thinking, recognizing patterns in space. And Mars Saturn in the fifth house both indicate good logic. So you can be a very logical person. But this combination can cause troubles with children. For example, like no kids, or kids can cause a lot of problems for you, or you feel like kids are very heavy. There are a lot of responsibilities. And also there can be some distant relationship with your kids. And this conjunction can also cause trouble for expressing love, caring for other people, because that's the house of expressions. So perhaps you don't understand how to do it. So similar to the fourth house, because the fourth house is about mothering and fifth house is about showing your love. So you might not know how to do it. You might not understand how to do it. And also fifth house is the expression. So the way you express yourself, express to other people, can be quite blunt and critical. So pay attention to that if you have this combination in the fifth house. But like I said in the beginning, if this combination forms some kind of Raj Yoga in the fifth house, it may not be so negative.
This is the house of gift. So gift is a really interesting word because we can think about gifts that we receive from others as a birthday gift or present, but also we can think about it as the gift that we receive from the gods. The gods are ruled by ninth house to build a self. So I think with Saturn and Mars, maybe the lack of confidence that I've got talents that could be coming up as a topic. And I don't know how to turn my hobbies, for example, into a profession. Probably we've got the desire that I want to do something because Mars is going to push, to express the self, but Saturn might not know what I am good at. So it's a lack of confidence. But also, this is the house of hobbies that allows us to switch off. That's a type of gift as well, because we get time off. What do we do with that time off? What do we do for fun? And maybe with Saturn and Mars, Mars wants to have fun, Saturn doesn't want to have fun. So, can I somehow find a balance with that? This could be quite a topic. But also with the fifth house, this is about money made from properties or the treasures of the father or pretty much the skill set of the father. So it's going to depend a lot on the upbringing. And also, this is the house of gambling. So games that give us chances to be rich. I mean, the fifth house is the planetary joy of Venus. So at the end of the day, this is a money house. It's a succeeding house as well at the same time. So often I see problems around money making because we don't know our talents. And also this house can connect to addictions and greed as well. So either Mars is the winner who is extremely sexually orientated, and then Saturn wants to teach Mars to slow down there, or Saturn, who is a little bit of a rigid type of character when it comes to intimacy. So we ignore sex completely. And obviously, this house is connected to sex in ancient astrology because having sex back in the days were really risky. There was no condom, there were no condoms, such things. So we could get pregnant and we could catch something as well pretty easily. So I would say that you're going to have to look at what you do for pleasure. Oh, and then by the way, this also represents enterprises as well. So Mars would like to become here self-employed. Saturn might not necessarily like the idea because of the fears of, "Ooh, what if it doesn't make any money and then we're going to be broke and all those type of things." So you're going to have to do something about that too. I mean, remembering that, you know what, everything is dangerous at the end of the day. And and in the fourth house, we were focusing on our emotional well-being. In the fifth house, we need to start seeing the world. We need to get out there and then play. So don't take that playfulness away from you. This is the house of inner child. Awaken it.
Mm.
What about the sixth house?
Oh, I just want to add something. I agree with you when you said there can be some frustration when it comes to gifts, because in Vedic astrology, fifth house actually rules the foundation for your success in the 10th house. So you need to be, not like you need to be, but if you are intelligent, it's almost guarantees that you can have success in your 10th house because you know how to manifest your things. And Mars Saturn conjunction in the fifth house does create frustration when it comes to your talents.
Yeah, and then also let's not forget that the fifth house is the house of sport again. So again, I would say that a sport, a competitive spirit. So this is about the joy of winning.
Mm.
So question, you must have goals with this house. And again, from a physical point of view, do sport with this combo as well. It's really going to help you quite a lot because once you achieve something, let's say with your body or sport, then all of a sudden it might get transferred into other area of life as well. So you can commit to something. Yes.
Right.
Okay, sixth house.
Sixth house is another tough house. Sixth house rules
By the
hassle.
way, do you want to share the screen or no?
Am I not sharing?
No. Oh, you are sharing. Sorry, I'm blind.
Okay. Sixth house rules hassle, work, lifestyles, everyday activities. It's a house of conflicts, challenges, litigation, imbalance, debts, disagreements, disease, and doing the service to the other people because sixth house below seventh house. So you are supporting the 7th house, other people. That's why you're in debt. That's why we work for other people. And 6th house, like I said, is another tough and hard house. And Mars is actually doing very good in the 6th house because the nature of Mars is about fighting. And 6th house has many problems to solve and many enemies to defeat. So people with Mars in the 6th house, they are very happy in conquering challenges and fixing problems. And they are also very capable dealing with difficulties in life. And people with Mars in the 6th house, they are very quick, decisive, and confident in making difficult decisions in life. And Saturn is also doing very well in the 6th house because 6th house rules the gut, digestive system. And Saturn is the planet of decreasing, reducing. So Saturn is really good at getting rid of things like toxins in the body, like your poop and pee. So when you have Saturn in the 6th house, you have a strong digestive system. And digestive system is very important for the body because a lot of disease can happen from your gut. And in the classical Vedic text, it says that you don't have debt when you have Saturn in the 6th house because Saturn is very disciplined. So it makes you very diligent in paying off your debt and also very conscious about not getting into debt. So that's why when you have Saturn in the 6th house, you can actually gain wealth of this placement. And for this combination, Saturn and Mars in the 6th house, they're both doing good in the 6th house. You're capable of fixing problems, defeating enemies and opponents, and you can have wealth and respect for the things that you do. But not so much for good health, because when you have 2 malefic planets in the 6th house, and also they are starving each other, so their dignity is affected by each other, by the other one is a malefic. So it's not good for this combination. And Mars-Saturn conjunction in the 6th house can create some health issues, especially for your immune system, because Mars is about the response system in the body. So if you put like vaccines in your body starts to respond. That's the response system. So also pay attention to vaccines if you have this combination in the 6th house.
I agree. This is a great placement for Mars. From a Hellenistic point of view, this is the planetary joy of Mars. So actually, Mars can make, the immune system stronger here. It is able to fight back any type of bacterial infections and all those type of things. But also, this is considered a house of injuries and accidents as well at the same time. So, often we get a bit lucky with Mars there. Also, it was in ancient astrology the place of hard work, such as slavery, or worked hard, or those who work for you. And then it's all about the duties and the obligations. So I see a lot of positive ones here. When you've got duties and obligations, Mars is telling you, okay, let's go and pay the bills. And Saturn is very responsible about that as well. So that could be great. Or if anything that needs effort to fulfill, I think it's a great combo. Because the 6th house represents your work ethic. It's kind of like an inexhaustible stamina. And that's where the problem comes in. Because Mars in the 6th is the inexhaustible stamina, and Saturn has got stamina as well, but it tells Mars, slow down, tiger. And when we don't, that's when we're going to burn out. We're going to have health issues. And this house is connected to the mind as well. We've got 4 houses that connects to mind: 3, 6, 9, and 12. 3rd house, we collect info, we study from books. 12, we intuitively know something. With the 6th house, we test that knowledge. So this conjunction for me is a little bit like your knowledge is always getting tested. Whether, like with Mars, we're going to push through our ideas and then we're going to test it around and then we're going to wait for the right moment to get going, or we're just going to be procrastinating all the time with the 6th. And also, this is the house of hygiene as well. Now, interesting that Saturn is the trap here. and Mars is someone who is trying to push us forward. So are we a slave to our own habits or practices, or are we trying to find something new instead? So that might be a question. And do we feel regrets or do we feel sins around it? You know, sixth house is very much how you treat your body. So the bad habits versus the good habits. We need to implement some great habits here if we want this house to be working out. We need to have a system in place. This is the house of stress management as well. So with Saturn and Mars, wow, the stress level could be really big. So what are you going to be do with that? Again, the nutrition, fitness, and the diet really comes into the picture with those. And if you feel like a slave at your workplace, this combo is not great. You know, the 10th house is profession, the 6th house is the job. So often I see people kind of going through this personal crisis situation with work, family. And one other thing I would like to mention actually, that we've got two relationship houses, 5th and 7th. The 6th is in the middle. So how I usually see this transition is that 5th house, we meet someone new, 6th house eventually move together, and the 7th house, we get married. So often I see relationship problems happening around that period once we move together with Saturn and Mars, because we might not know the person properly, or we get disappointed by them, or the real self is actually kind of coming out. Anyway, a lot of things to talk about here, but let's just move on to the 7th house then.
I think how you understand the house is very interesting, because 6th house is actually 12 houses away from 7th. In Vedic astrology, they look at those relations. So 12 houses away from the house of balance and partnership is a disagreement, and also falling out of love. I just find it's quite interesting.
Absolutely. I also look at it from that point of view as well. But also, I would call the 6th house as the house of commitment issues, because it's 12 sign away from the 7th. So the fears that are causing a wedge between a couple, or the addiction problems, or, you know, the different personalities in a way, you know, like in Sex and the City, we've got Miranda, who is a little bit of a clean freak, and then she had this boyfriend who is quite messy and brings a dog home, and so on. So obviously two different personalities, and then eventually they clashed and then they separate. So often this is going to be a challenge with Saturn and Mars. Once we move together, that's when we get to know, you know, how you really are. When it comes to, you know, like Miranda, for example, in Sex and the City, got really offended seeing a skid mark on the guy's underwear, and she was disgusted by it. So these are the things that only gonna turn out once you move together.
Yeah.
Yeah. 7th house.
So 7th house is partnerships, romantic and business partnerships, marriage, trading, negotiation, bargaining. And 7th house is the house of other people, because the 7th house is the first house is you. 7th house is the disappearance of you. So that's why it rules other people and how you interact with others. And in Vedic astrology, 7th house symbolizes travels, because like I said, first house is the sunrise, it's you. 7th house is the disappearance of you, and then sunset. So the movement of this from first house to the 7th house, that's the travel. So some people, when they have moon in the 7th house, usually it symbolizes constant travels. And the nature of Mars is about being free, individualistic. And 7th house, like I said, is another house of group thing, partnerships and other people. So by nature, Mars is not doing well in the 7th house. And Mars can also cause trouble when you interact with other people. Perhaps you're too dominant and unwilling to cooperate and compromise with others, and you don't get along with other people. But Mars is good if you are in a more cutthroat and competitive business environments because you don't have to care about other people's feelings and needs. And when it comes to interacting with your spouse, like I said, Mars is very individualistic planet. So it doesn't create a typical loving, nurturing situation in the relationship. It might be more of a sense of coexistence. Like you do your own things, I do my own things. But if Mars is strong, it's not so negative. It could be that two people are very independent. They are all very busy doing their own things, but at the same time, they're still supporting one another. But it's just it's not a typical loving and supportive group situation. And Saturn, the nature of seventh house and Saturn doesn't match well either, because seventh house is a love house and Saturn is cold, detached. But Saturn is very responsible. So you can attract unloving partners with this placement. And the interactions with other people are not very warm, affectionate, and the relationship is more of a responsibilities than love. But it's mature and stable because Saturn has directional strength in the seventh house. That means Saturn is actually doing good in the seventh house. It gains strength. And typically you are faithful and disciplined to any contractual relationships. You follow through your obligations, legal, material responsibilities. And Saturn in the seventh house doesn't deny relationships. It brings delays. And for this conjunction Mars-Saturn in the seventh house, it can create a sense of oppression in your marriage. It can create problems with in your partnership. And a sense of oppression is because Mars is the planet of moving forward. And Saturn is the planet of resisting changes, like holding on, following through responsibilities. So even though there might be issues in your relationship, you still feel obligated to stay together, regardless the obstacles and challenges. So this can create some frustration in the union itself.
You know, different authors, different interpretations. So when we look at the Hellenistic interpretation of these planets, and Saturn is said to be in the seventh house to choose the wrong partner, to have a wrong choice, to marrying a widow, for example. And Mars would represent adultery here. Now, in Arabic astrology, for example, Saturn says the marriage is going to bring sorrow, grief, or possibly separation, and Mars would represent war in the marriage. You know, do I agree with these? You know, I mean, obviously, we're going to experience some problem, but in a positive way, you know, I think Saturn here wants someone to provide security, while Mars wants someone who is going to be, you know, helping me to express individuality. Remember that the seventh house is opposing the first. So when the partner embraces those traits, Saturn and Mars, it might come across to us as in an energy that, you know, I cannot tolerate. But if we embrace and use that Saturn and Mars for our advantage as well, then it's not going to bother us. So you're going to have, Mars is the planet of fixing. So sometimes we need to fix the relationship here. Maybe the age gap, maybe the different kind of like positions in the world, such as I'm a CEO, you are a cook. There is nothing wrong with it, but it can cause many frustrations for many people, right? That we are not on the same social level. Saturn is a social level, social planet anyway. So yeah, this could, I mean, for example, Jung said that the seventh house is something that we are not aware of within us. And when we are not aware of something within us, it will appear in the outer world. So that's why I call this house as the law of attraction. And when you've got Saturn and Mars in the seventh house, it means that you're going to attract Saturn and Mars characteristics Maybe someone brutal, maybe someone who is just focusing on sport, maybe someone who is just going to be focusing on business, and you're not going to be able to tolerate it. So the seventh house is the mirror. What does it want to show you? And you're going to have to work on that, basically.
Yeah.
And yes, I agree. I tend to be looking at the seventh house as the house of old age, because the sun disappears here, and the seventh is 4 from the fourth. So it could talk to us about the second home or an old age. Often this Saturn and Mars, for example, is so afraid of falling into oblivion because I'm going to disappear. Once the sun goes down, no one is going to see me. So often Saturn and Mars shows trouble in paradise, especially at an old age.
Hmm.
Okay, eighth house.
So the eighth house is the house of other people's money and resources. It rules our money that we share with other people, like money we share with our spouse, money that we share with our business partners. It rules mutual resources, assets, and it also rules the money that we get from other people. That's why it rules inheritance, commission, donation, and gifts. And eighth house also rules anything hidden, hidden resources, hidden knowledge. It's our ability to see and investigate the unseen, the hidden. So that's why it also rules our research spirit. And in Vedic astrology, it rules longevity. So eighth house is the house of source of vitality. It helps reproduction and keeps you alive. And in the previous video that we did, Jupiter and Venus conjunction, I mentioned that Venus is actually doing very well in the eighth house because Venus represents the reproductive juice. For men is semen, for women is the vaginal juice. So when Venus sits in the eighth house, it actually provides a very good vitality and good health and good body, long lifespan. But Mars is opposite of that because Mars is not nurturing, not moisturizing, and rather it's actually a quick and passionate energy. So Mars in the eighth house doesn't indicate long lifespan, and you're more likely to get injuries, cuts, and accidents. But Mars also represents the drive and passion, and eighth house is our ability to investigate and research the unseen. So you will have the passion to dig deep, and you are able to see things quickly and deeply, which is very good for certain careers. And Saturn in the eighth house indicates longevity. So that's the two different scenarios. Mars doesn't represent longevity. And Mars here represents long lifespan, because eighth house, because Saturn is about holding on. But Saturn in the eighth house doesn't guarantee good health. It indicates no matter what kind of health challenges you may have, you will have a long life. So which is not very ideal, because if you have injuries or if you have chronic health issues and then you still have a long life, then it's not quality life. And Saturn doesn't do well in Mars's house. Eighth house is about ups and downs, unexpected changes. So no matter how bitter the situations are, Saturn will do its best to resist changes, which may miss the chance for improvements and transformation. But Saturn is very good in the eighth house. It will make your mind very deep. In the classical Vedic text, it says your mind is unbreakable. So Mars-Saturn conjunction in the eighth house can create problems with your in-laws. And perhaps in-laws are not very supportive, and which can cause problems within your family as well, because eighth house is looking at the second house. So if your in-laws are not supporting you, it can create problem with you and your spouse, and maybe you and your family. But both planets, Mars and Saturn, can make your mind deep. You're able to see things differently, quickly, and it's good for research work or any work requires mental power.
You know, in Hellenistic astrology, we call the second house as the gate into the underworld. And in the eighth house, we call it as the gate out of the underworld. So therefore, this is a psychological house. We inherited psychological problems which has got a karmic stamp on us. And this shows that you're going to have to snap out of it. And when you have got Saturn and Mars there, it might be very challenging to get rid of these psychological blockages. Or it might be causing a lot of fear, a constant struggle. But also, the second house is the gains from your own effort. The eighth house is gain from others or through others. But I think the eighth house, this is the house of, this combination is the house of give and take. And I think this is a reminder that money is something that you cannot take with you to the grave. So often what we see with Saturn and Mars, that we end up having to lose money, because that's a cosmic reminder that why are you getting stuck so much on something? And these people have to, I don't know, give up their house, or they're not going to get the alimony, or all these type of topics could be coming up. So this is the house of grief and losses. Or it could bring up the question of, will I be a victim of a crime? Or am I going to become a beggar? Or am I going to become a criminal with this? So existential crisis often popping up with the eighth house. And for me, this is the house that is connected to a lot of mental problems: schizophrenia, depression, mania, obsession, chronic kind of laziness when Saturn and Mars here. Very important that we start digging into our spiritual existence. Now, the ninth house I know is about knowledge, okay? But in the eighth house, we have, in order for us to go for something new, we're going to have to go through crisis situations most of the time. So the seeds are getting planted in the eighth house, where we need to start looking at things from a psychological point of view or an occult point of view. We need to discover the meaning of that crisis situation, what is happening in our life. How do you deal with losses? Are you able to let go of something? Are you able to let go of a toxic relationship, for example? Remembering that a death of something old is actually a birth of something new. So letting go is going to be a big question here. But Mars wants to let go, Saturn doesn't. And sometimes we have to let go of the material world here, so that our psychological well-being is 1,000 times better. By the way, modern astrology tends to be looking at this house as the house of sex. I'd like to mention that it first got introduced in 1910, so a good 100 years ago. Before that, sex was ruled by the fifth house solely. But especially, this is the house of tantric sex. From a procreation point of view, that's a fifth house topic. So that's just something I would like to add to it. Yeah, ninth house.
Ninth house rules the teachings from the elders, grandparents, parents, gurus, teachers, those fatherly figures, because they give you the definition of right and wrong in the beginning of your life. And it rules our higher mind, belief system, philosophy, and foreign travels, foreign places. And ninth house in Vedic astrology rules our good deeds, the deeds that we could do for other people. Therefore, it leads to good luck and prosperity. Ninth house is the luckiest house in Vedic astrology. And Mars here doesn't get along with those fatherly figures like teachers, gurus, because Mars doesn't follow rules. Mars likes to give rules and orders. So you could, when you have Mars in the ninth house, you can have more arguments and disagreements with gurus, teachers, priests, advisors, and father. Especially ninth house rules the relationship with the father, the teaching from the father. So when you have Mars here, you can have more clashes with your father. And maybe the father's teaching is not there, not available for you. and maybe you don't agree with your father's teaching. You want to break traditions and rules. But ninth house is the house of Dharma, doing the right things and fulfilling responsibilities that are in line with your life path. So if Mars is strong, Mars has some good aspects and help from his friends. You can have passion for doing what's right and serving the world. Now Saturn, ninth house is like I said, it's the luckiest house and prosperity. So Saturn here in the classical Vedic text, it says you are separated from luck. You're separated from wealth. You're separated from support and teachings from the gurus, teachers, role models, and your father. And you're separated from your Dharma. And ninth house is the good deeds that we do for other people. And Saturn is very miserly, stingy. So you may tend to focus just on yourself rather than genuinely helping other people. So it sounds really depressing, but if your Saturn is in good dignity in the ninth house, it can flip around. And also, like I said, if there are other planets that are more prominent in your charts, Saturn in the ninth house only plays a portion of your life, not your whole destiny. And for this combination, Mars Saturn in the ninth house, so you can definitely create problems with your father, the relationship with the father. Perhaps it's difficult to understand and connect with the father, and the father's teaching may not be available when you were a child. And this could also happen with your teachers, gurus, mentors, those fatherly figures, because those people, they are here to provide us guidance and wisdom in life, and it leads us to higher wisdom. So this conjunction could really create lack of support from those people, fatherly figures, and also distant relationships with them. As a result, it will take 10 times longer and more mistakes to get to where you like to go in life. So that's why you are separated from luck, separated from Dharma, because you don't have the support and guidance and wisdom from those people. And both planets indicates not generally doing the good deeds for other people. So you can also be more critical with your words. For example, you don't give compliments easily. So if you have this combination in the ninth house, pay attention to that.
Interesting that Vedic astrology looks at it as the house of father.
Relationship with the father.
Now, in Hellenistic astrology, the ninth house is the joy of the sun, which is one of the archetypes that represents the father in the chart. How I look at it is that, I mean, it's interesting to kind of look at the story, the mythology part, because the sun in Greek mythology was Helios. And he was thought to ride a golden chariot, which brought the sun across the sky each day. So obviously that's a travel. At night, it made its journey back in a golden cup to the eastern horizon so that it can travel again. And Helios, by the way, was the offspring of the Titans. And his youngest child, when discovered that his father was the sun, went to ask for a gift. And Helios always had a struggle of saying no. So he wanted to grant his wishes. And his wish was to ride a chariot, but he was unable to tame the horses. So he was destroying the earth. So Zeus had to strike him down with a thunderbolt that brought fire to earth. So plenty of people lost their life. So first of all, because this is the house of expansion, I feel like sometimes, life is going to say no to us with Saturn being here, because it tells us that we are not on the right path. It's kind of, I mean, actually, traditional textbooks saying if you have got Saturn here, especially in a night chart, then you are experiencing the wrath of the gods because of past life or because of your deeds, actually not in past life, in your current life. But if you've got a day chart, then actually it makes you a good mentor. Thank God I've got a day chart, and I've got Saturn in the 9th house, so I became the mentor rather than experiencing the wrath of the gods. But anyway, what I wanted to say here is that it's so important sometimes to listen to gurus and teachers and not just following our strict mindset and getting opinionated about something, because Saturn Mars combo can cause that. When you don't know what to wish for, when you don't go towards the meaning of your life, when you actually look down on Earth, when you look down on people, that's something Saturn Mars can also do here. And Saturn is definitely a reminder that you shouldn't be doing that, by the way. And a lot of other things to mention here anyway, but let's move on to the 10th house.
I think it's very interesting that you have Saturn in the 9th house. My partner also have Saturn in the 9th house. He's also a teacher.
Yeah, it's a good teacher combination, especially in a day chart.
Unfortunately, he's he's in the day chart. Yeah. Well, so 10th house. 10th house is the house of karma. Karma means your actions, and it shows the bigger things that we like to do in this lifetime. And usually it's through career. But it really shows the bigger things, the ambitions that we like to do in this incarnation. And 10th house is the highest point of the charts. That's why it rules our social image. And what we are known for is our reputation. And Mars in Vedic astrology in the 10th house has directional strength. So that means Mars gets extra strength when it's in the 10th house. And people with these placements, they are very passionate and focused on the things that they want to manifest in this lifetime or their career. And Mars is a planet of command in the house of influence upon other people. So you can be a natural leader with these placements. And 10th house is also one of the tough houses, like 3rd, 6th, 10, and 11. They are upachaya houses in Vedic astrology. But 10th and 11 are not as tough as 3rd and 6th. And 10th house rules your worldly actions, how you act in the world. When Mars is initiative and getting things done in the 10th house, you are very efficient in accomplishing tasks. And you can be very self-disciplined, self-orientated, and you tend to get respect with the things that you do. And Saturn in the 10th house is also very good. You are very intellectual because Saturn is about logical thinking and Saturn has organizational skills. So when you have Saturn in the 10th house, you will be a leader, you will have power, and you are dedicated to your work and efforts, and you will get success, respect, and you will be wealthy based on the classical Vedic text. So for this conjunction, Mars and Saturn in the 10th house, it suggests that you'll have a lot of dedication, focus, and efforts in the things that you want to manifest in this lifetime, in your career, and you're a natural leader, and you're not afraid of hard work and efforts. So, but even though it comes with a lot of good things, but 10th house also rules the work environment. With 2 malefic planets in the 10th house, you might attract more challenging supervisors, or you might find yourself in a more challenging work situations.
I agree, actually. I think it's quite a positive placement. But a couple of things I'd like to mention as well, because usually we've got the midheaven here. And the midheaven, imagine the midheaven as the branches of the tree, and the IC is the roots of the tree. So when the roots are not, the soil around the tree, when it's not looked after, the branches are never going to grow. Now, Saturn and Mars surely gives you the inspiration to grow, but often we disregard our IC, which is the soil around the tree. And, the MC is pretty much the call to leave the family roots behind. And when we've got struggle, when we've got codependency issues because of family or family drama or all those type of things, this can be a challenging position still. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add, really. I think the 10th house is the behavior which we need to embrace, or the act you need to play, an image you need to display in order for you to be successful. And it's going to be very important with the Saturn and Mars that you embrace the leadership qualities, that you have got goals and so forth. Otherwise, there could be problems. Yeah, that's all I wanted to mention here. Okay, what about the 11th?
11th house rules gains, profits, recognition, the benefits that we get from the society. That's why it's a money-making house, because you're making money, getting the money from the society, from the large group of people. And it rules our dreams, long-term dreams, hopes, and wishes. And it also rules our friends' social contacts, the marketplace, your elder siblings. And Mars is also doing good in the 11th house because Mars has strong passion to acquire wealth and pleasures. And Mars is not afraid of putting the work. And even though Mars has the tendency to be very competitive, combative, but this quality supports really well earning money and competition. So with Mars in the 11th house, you get luxuries and you are able to enjoy them. Because some of the charts, if you don't have, enjoying luxuries requires talents. So when you have Mars in the 11th house, you are able to enjoy luxuries. And the 11th house rules friends and social contacts. And Mars in the 11th house, you are enjoying socializing and building your own community. And you gain benefits from your friends and social contacts, but not in a way that they feel being taken advantage of. And Saturn in the 11th house, based on the classical Vedic text, you will have steady income and wealth. And when you have Saturn in the 11th house, it's because it's a planet of disciplines in the house of making money. So this is good. And Saturn also provides long-term beneficial effects on making money in the marketplace. And Saturn's nature of hardworking and determination works really well in Saturn's houses like 10th and 11th. So Saturn works really well both in 10th and 11th. But particularly in the 11th house, because the 11th house is about gaining benefits, making money from large group of people from the society, and sometimes maybe from your friends. So it's a taking house. So we need to check the sign that Saturn is in. If Saturn is in ill dignity, because Saturn is misery, so you might end up just taking all the money, all the benefits, and not sharing with other people. And for this conjunction, Mars-Saturn conjunction in the 11th house, it can create trouble with your elderly siblings. And you could have distant relationship with them, or you might not have their support. And Mars is very energizing. It gets things moving. And Saturn is slow and calculated. So when these two opposing energies happening in the same house, in the 11th house, sometimes you can have more doubts and miss out some market opportunities for this. And this could also apply in achieving your goals because Mars represents decisiveness. And when it's starved by Saturn, you may feel not confident in making things happen, second guess about yourself, or you compensate for your lack of confidence by acting super strong.
In Hellenistic astrology, we call the 11th house as the house of good diamond. So this is one of the luckiest house, actually, and represents the noble spirits. And in ancient Greece, the word diamond, which comes from a Greek word, basically what it means is to divide or to distribute. Now, what I would say, because Mars is about entitlement, and Saturn is, even though it's not a greedy planet, but it is a little bit more about the inner circle. rather than equality for everyone. So if you just think about Saturn as the ruler of Capricorn, which is about protecting the castle area and protecting everyone who is in the castle, but not caring about what happens outside of the castle. And that's where Aquarius is going to come into the picture, where it's very much about let's extend that. Let's bring in other people into the castles. Let's make it bigger so more people can fit in. So this Saturn Mars could represent a bit of a rigid mindset about who is fitting in, who is not fitting in. And also, I mean, when it comes to demons, actually, there were good demons and bad demons according to ancient principles. And Saturn wants to block out. Which one are you blocking out? The good ones or the bad ones? So the good friends or the bad friends, right? But also this is a succeeding house, so it's going to be connected to money as well. And I agree completely what you said. And by the way, another meaning to the 11th house, because the midheaven is your midlife, middle age. The 11th house is the end of our middle age. That's when midlife crises start. And often with Saturn and Mars, we can see some midlife crisis situations, some major turnarounds, such as divorce. 11th house is the love triangle house, actually. So often we get cheated on and then we get divorced. And then what the heck am I going to do now with my life? So we need to answer these type of topics. But the 11th house is the joy of Jupiter. So I think it's the house of abundance. This is the house of lottery winning. What happens is, let's say you get divorced with the 11th house. That's a lottery winning for you, believe me. At the beginning, it's not going to look like it. But eventually, it's going to bring someone into your life. If you are open-minded enough and then you are not getting into depression, this is going to bring you someone pretty powerful and someone great to be around and so forth. And last but not least, the 12th house.
So in Vedic astrology, 12th house rules losses, expenses, and it also signifies the loss of energy, fatigue, weakness. And 12th house is behind you, behind the ascendant. So it signifies the things that are invisible to our eyes, something intangible. Things don't have concrete form, like ideas, imagination, dreams, and the subconscious mind. And also because it's behind you, that's why it rules something far away, like foreign things, foreign countries. But in Vedic astrology, it rules things happen behind closed doors. So it rules bedroom pleasures, and it also rules secluded places and isolation. And 12th house is the house of liberation from this material world. And Mars is a planet of strength in the house of loss of energy. So physically speaking, your energy gets drained easily. And also the energy level is not very stable. Sometimes you feel very vibrant, energetic, but other times you feel really fatigued. And on another level, strength symbolizes if you have a strong mind and willpower and the ability to withstand challenges. So Mars here in the 12th house, sometimes you are very determined, and sometimes you can be quite wishy-washy. So there's no consistencies in your strength. And 12th house rules enemies because it rules people or things that are not visible to our eyes. So, and Mars is about fighting and conflicts. So Mars is actually doing good in the 12th house in this sense. Mars helps you fight your enemies. And 12th house also rules foreign countries. And Mars is actually happy in the foreign places because Mars has a lot of passion exploring different places and somewhere new. And Saturn is a planet of scarcity, and 12th house represents losses and expenses. So if Saturn is in good dignity, Saturn is strong, you can actually accumulate wealth with these placements because you are very careful with your spending. But if Saturn is in poor dignity, it's poverty because you can have a lot of bad, unnecessary expenses. So it really depends on the dignity of Saturn. And 12th house is the house of loss of energy, fatigue, weakness. and Saturn is about getting rid of things. So a planet of getting rid of things, reducing, is in the house of loss of energy. It can somehow create more health issues. So pay attention to that if you have these placements. And for this conjunction, Mars and Saturn in the 12th house can definitely signify trouble for your health, because Mars gives you inconsistent energy level, and Saturn is about challenges and limitation related to health matters. And Saturn's influence can also bring about like chronic health issues. And 12th house is the house that's not visible to your eyes. So it can indicate some underlying health issues here. So really pay attention to that. But Saturn and Mars conjunction could be good for working in a foreign land, because Mars is happy exploring new places and Saturn rules work. So this could work well. And if Saturn is strong, exalted, particularly in Libra, it can signify that you are fighting for social justice in a distant land. You're fighting for other society. So you're doing the good deeds.
Yeah, I agree. Saturn has got planetary joy in the 12th house, so it's not necessarily a bad placement. I mean, 12th house represents, Saturn is the planet of limitations, fears, difficulties. And then 12th house is the invisible obstacles in life. So actually Saturn, when it works well, it can block them out. It can give them shape. Now, the planets are rising here, but not fully visible yet. So it's just like in nature, right? We see the mountains, then the top of the trees, and so forth. Very Saturnian, you know, the mountains and so forth. So, and then also Saturn is a night planet, but Saturn is actually rising here. So it enjoys the darkness a little bit. But what happens is Saturn is asking for some sacrifice from us. It makes us give up something or to work harder for it. It doesn't allow us to bring something new into our lives without letting go of the old ones. So that's going to be very important here. I mean, Saturn is the planet of pressure. So, and the 12th house is called as the house of undoing. Self-undoing happens when we gain more wisdom. And in traditional astrology, we call it as the house of bad diamonds. So therefore, this is the enemies. Now, what are your enemies? Well, the losses you go through, the illnesses, your self-destructive behavior, and Saturn and Mars combo is really good for cutting those out. But when we are wallowing in pain, this is a real killer as well at the same time, though. And it leads to depression, melancholy, disappointments, denials, rejection, loneliness, just working hard, making money, but not having that person right next to you. So very important that we start working, you know, with our subconscious mind, which is basically the 12th house, and we get motivated. Jung calls it as the shadow. And the shadow is the ego diastonic complex, repressed ID, the shadow aspect, the shadow archetype of our life, which is very much about the ego has got an ideal, leading the ego to resist and project the shadow. So it's a self-emotional blind spot. And the Saturn Mars wants us to kind of see through these blind spots. But when you are too entitled with that Mars, when you do not want to see because you just go towards the future, this is a real struggle here. So self-acceptance and working on the subconscious matters are going to be very, very important, and probably to be a little bit helpless, or not helpless, sorry, selfless, such as charities, right? that might become very important with this. Okay, guys, we hope that everyone got a bit of a golden nugget here, actually. In regards to the upcoming conjunction as well, you can use this a little bit for your transits, and you can also use it for your natal chart as well. And thank you, Corinne, for joining me today. It was a pleasure. Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.